Welcome back, y'all. Today we're going to continue our Versus series. We already started off with the Paladin, so if you haven't seen that one yet, go ahead and go check that one out. But how this is going to work is we're going to take a class and then we basically go through all the subclasses and break down what makes them unique and then put them into a tier list so we can figure out which is the best one and which is the worst one. For this video, we're going to continue with the Cleric. Now, the Cleric has 8 subclasses, and I want to see a raise of hands. How many of you have played with Knowledge Domain? That's what I thought. So let's go ahead and get started with Knowledge Domain. Now, before we begin with knowledge here, these are the cleric levels we're going to look at. And the levels that are not listed, all of the clerics are going to have access to the same things. So it's either going to be like a boon or a negative against a subclass. Starting off with Knowledge Domain here, we pick up Blessing of Knowledge at level 1. And this will allow us to basically double up our proficiency with either Arcana, History, Nature, or Religion. And we also pick up the domain spell Command, which is really good, but every cleric has Command available to them. And then we also get Sleep as well. Heading in game, and at level 2, we pick up our Channel Divinity skill. For knowledge here, it's Knowledge of the Ages. So we gain proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability. You can see them all laid out here. The best two are probably Wisdom and Dexterity, and that's because these skill checks are very common in Baldur's Gate 3. And this is a nice divinity skill. I wouldn't call it bad, but its usefulness is really going to depend on the player. And for me, I'm not really ever going to gravitate towards this because I'm already setting up my characters to be proficient in certain areas already. And using this Channel Divinity charge, just not my cup of tea. At level 3, we get the domain spells Hold Person and Calm Emotions. Hold Person is an amazing control ability, and Calm Emotions can be good in situations like against the Harpies in the Druid's Grove. But again, all the clerics have access to these 2 spells at level 3, so not necessarily something to write home about with Knowledge Domain. At level 5, Knowledge Domain picks up Speak with Dead, but every cleric has this available to them. We do get Slow. Now, this is unique to Knowledge Domain, and this is a pretty good concentration. You're going to start to notice a trend that Knowledge Domain here is going to have a lot of concentrations that they pick up. Now at level 6 we pick up Speak with Animals, but this is a unique one because this will use our Channel Divinity charge and it lasts until long rest. I wouldn't use this ever. And I guess the better option would be to read thoughts, but this is only going to help you out in conversations. It's a concentration and it's your Channel Divinity, so not that great.
Thank you for making Mistress go away. She was horrid.
At level 7 we pick up Confusion and Odalic's Resilient Sphere. Now Confusion, this is one of the best control abilities in the game. And Odalic's Resilient Sphere here, it's okay, but we also have Sanctuary at home, which is kind of better because it's a level 1 spell and it also isn't a concentration. At level 8, we pick up Potent Spellcasting, which is going to add our Wisdom modifier to our Cleric cantrips. And only Knowledge Domain and Light Domain get this feature for Cleric. And finally, at level 9, we pick up Dominate Person and Telekinesis. My favorite out of these 2 is Telekinesis. I think this is a really fun concentration ability just to throw people around. Now when ranking Knowledge Domain Cleric here, not taking into account multi-classing or any gear or equipment that you get in the game, I think I have to put it into B tier because it has a lot of good concentration abilities as far as crowd control. Obviously its Channel Divinity ability leaves a lot to be desired, but the B tier for me means that it's a solid subclass. And this one kind of surprised me. I thought I was actually going to be throwing into something like F tier or something like that, but here we are. Next up is Death Domain Cleric, and at level 1 they are proficient with every martial weapon. We also pick up the subclass feature Reaper, which states that all of our necromancy cantrips can target an additional target. And yes, you'll notice in the background we're having a little bit of a cleric party. We have this group, and for whatever reason they don't like each other. Anywho, moving on. Actually, not moving on, we have the prepared spell Ray of Sickness that Death Domain picks up, and they also pick up False Life. I really like False Life, at least until you get Aid, but now we can move on to level 2. At level 2, we pick up the Channel Divinity Touch of Death. This is going to add necrotic damage to either our melee attack or a melee spell, and this adds a nice chunk of damage to our offensive capability. At level 3, we get Ray of Enfeeblement and Blindness. Both of these are okay, not my favorite spells, but they can be useful early on against somebody like Jor Ragzlin. Mostly useful against, I would say, martial enemies, especially in the case of Ray of Enfeeblement there. At level 5, the Death Domain Cleric gets Animate Dead, which admittedly every cleric subclass gets this spell, but they also pick up Vampiric Touch. Now this can be really good if you build into it with equipment, but otherwise you're probably not going to bother with this spell. And that's mainly because we have something like Spirit Guardians. At level 6 we pick up the subclass feature Inescapable Destruction. If a target is resistant to necrotic damage, we will ignore it, which is pretty good because a lot of enemies in Baldur's Gate 3 are resistant to necrotic damage. At level 8, we pick up Divine Strike Necrotic, which is going to add necrotic damage to our melee strikes. And then at level 9, we get the spell Cloud Kill and Contagion. Both of these are really strong. Cloud Kill more so in AoE, and Contagion really works if you're going to be patient, usually on a beefy, like tanky target. So overall, when it comes to ranking the Death Domain Cleric, I have to give it the A rank. I think it's really strong in the early game with the subclass feature Reaper, being able to target 2 enemies with your Necromancy cantrips, really good. And then from there, it gets really strong as a melee fighter, while getting some really powerful spells like Cloud Kill. And next up, we have Life Domain Cleric. At level 1, you are heavy armor proficient, so a little bit more variety when it comes to your armor and gear choices. We also pick up Disciple of Life, so our healing spells will heal for even more. Our domain spells we pick up are Cure Wounds and Bless Here. These are both really good, but honestly, every other cleric gets these, so not a big boon there. At level 2, we pick up our Channel Divinity, and that is Preserve Life, and this is a good AoE heal. You're going to start to notice a trend with Life Domain Cleric here, and that is a lot of subclass healing features. And then moving on to level 3, we just pick up the domain spells Aid and Lesser Restoration. Every cleric gets these. Aid is probably my favorite out of these two, just because it helps bolster your allies. At level 5, we get the domain spells Revivify and Beacon of Hope, and I think Beacon of Hope combined with Life Domain Cleric is really good, because when you're healed, it'll max out the amount of hit points possible. And then in level 6, we pick up the subclass feature Blessed Healer, so when we heal somebody, we'll also be healing our Life Domain Cleric at the same time. Now for level 7, 8, and 9 for our domain spells, we pick up Death Ward, we pick up Guardian of Faith, we pick up Mass Cure Wounds, and we pick up Greater Restoration. Unfortunately for Life Domain Cleric, every other cleric gets these spells. Now jumping back to level 8 real quick, we do get Divine Strike Radiant, so our melee strike is going to have radiant damage added to it. So overall with Life Domain Cleric, a lot of subclass features that just center around healing, and unfortunately all the domain spells, all the other clerics have access to them. But I do have a soft spot for a dedicated healer in my party. So while I want to put it at like an A- tier, I just can't do that. I have to put it in a B tier, even though this is one of my personal favorite clerics. And I think that just mostly comes down to the nature of the subclass just being so centered around healing, which isn't a bad thing. It's just it doesn't have as much variety and choice as the other subclasses that we're going to get to. Up next, we have probably one of my favorite subclasses when it comes to the cleric, and that is the Light Domain. At level 1, we get Warding Flare, which is a great reaction ability that will impose disadvantage on attacks targeting the cleric. We also pick up the domain spells Light, Burning Hands, and Fairy Fire. Burning Hands is awesome, and Fairy Fire can be useful as well. At level 2, we get our Channel Divinity, Radiance of Dawn. This is a giant AoE nuke of radiant damage. This is amazing against undead. And at level 3, our domain spells we pick up are Flaming Sphere and Scorching Ray. Scorching Ray is really good. Flaming Sphere I don't often use that much, but again, Scorching Ray here, this is a really powerful spell that only Light Domain clerics get. Moving on to level 5 for Light Domain, we pick up Fireball. Fireball. Need I say any more? And I guess also we pick up Daylight, but nobody gives a crap about Daylight. Fireball. And at level 6, our Warding Flare gets improved to Improved Warding Flare, which now that disadvantage we put on an attack roll, we can now use it as a reaction towards our allies as well. Level 7, we pick up the domain spell Guardian of Faith, not a big deal there, and we also pick up Firewall, or I guess Wall of Fire. This can be a really fun spell, but I always wanted to do more. I don't know, you guys can let me know how you feel about Wall of Fire. And at level 8, we pick up the passive Potent Spellcaster, so our Wisdom modifier will be added to our cantrip damage. And lastly, for level 9, we pick up Destructive Wave, and we also pick up Flame Strike. Flame Strike is okay, but again, we have Fireball. Now, Destructive Wave, on the other hand, this is a really fun spell. Now, when it comes to ranking Light Domain Cleric here, I don't think it will be a surprise to anybody, just if you can tell the enthusiasm in my voice when talking about this subclass. This is an easy S tier. And this comes down to the fact that they get a lot of powerful spells like Fireball, Destructive Wave, on top of their Channel Divinity being a really good AoE spell, and then their reaction ability with Warding Flare is a great survivability tool. So pair this with the base cleric spells, and yeah, it's just so easy. S tier, S tier, S tier, S tier. Alright, so that is 4 of the cleric subclasses down, and we have 4 more to go. What? Was I wearing this shirt before? Anywho, let's move on to Nature Domain now. At level 1 for Nature Domain Cleric, we are heavy armor proficient. We also get to pick up a druid cantrip, and I really like Shillelagh here. On top of that, we get the domain spell Speak with Animals and then Animal Friendship. And at level 2, our Channel Divinity is Charm Animals and Plants. So if you're not picking up the vibe on Nature Domain here, it's basically druid and cleric meshed together. At level 5, we pick up the domain spells Spike Growth and Bark Skin. Bark Skin is an interesting choice because we are already heavy armor proficient, so this will only bump our armor up to 16. And it's a concentration, so not that great. At level 5, we pick up the domain spells Plant Growth and Sleet Storm. And these are, I would say, mediocre kind of control spells. Out of the two of them, I do think Sleet Storm's probably the better one just because it creates an ice floor. Now, what I do like about Nature Domain here is their reaction, Dampen Element. So if they're targeted with one of the elements, Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Thunder, they will have the damage. So that can be pretty good as a reaction ability. At level 7, we pick up Grasping Vine. This can be a fun addition to your party to have. And we also pick up Dominate Beast as a concentration spell. But at level 8, we pick up Divine Strike Elemental Fury. And I like this because we get to add one of the element types to our damage, whether it be melee or range. And to finish off Nature Domain here, as far as their domain spells, we get Insect Plague and we also get Wall of Stone. I don't see a lot of people use either one of these spells, and to be honest, I don't use them myself. Now, when it comes to ranking Nature Domain here, I think I have to put it into C tier. A lot of these spells, I would just much rather prefer them on Druid. So for me, them giving Cleric all these Druid spells on top of their Divinity not being that great, I just think this subclass is below average. And next up, our next Cleric domain is going to be Tempest Domain. Now, at level 1, you are heavy armor proficient as well as able to use martial weapons. We pick up Wrath of the Storm as a reaction ability, which has a saving throw associated with it, but even if the target succeeds their saving throw, they're still going to take half damage. And our first domain spells are Thunderwave and Fog Cloud. I really like Thunderwave as a push ability. At level 2, we pick up our Channel Divinity, which is Destructive Wrath. This is going to max out either our Thunder or our Lightning damage, and this can be really dangerous when you pair it with something like Create or Destroy Water, which will double up Lightning damage. So this is a very powerful Channel Divinity skill. Moving on to level 3, we pick up the domain spell Shatter, which I really like this one as well, and then Gust of Wind. Kind of okay, but I like using Thunderwave over Gust of Wind in most cases. Moving on to level 5, we pick up Sleet Storm and Call Lightning for our domain spells. I don't think I need to say too much about Call Lightning here, but it's one of the best spells in the game, especially if you want to save on your spell slots in combat, because as long as you maintain concentration with Call Lightning, you can just keep using it over and over again. Amazing spell, love Call Lightning. At level 6, we pick up the passive feature Thunderbolt Strike, so when we do lightning or thunder damage to a large or smaller target, we can push them up to 3 meters. This is okay, probably not something I would write home about. At level 7 for our domain spells, we pick up Freedom of Movement. I like this because it lasts until long rest, so decent spell there, but we also get Ice Storm, and this is a great AoE spell. It covers a large area and does a pretty good bit of damage, and the ice floor it leaves behind can be pretty funny. And at level 8 here, we get our Divine Strike for Thunder. This can be a melee or a range variant, just like all the rest. For our domain spells, at level 9, we pick up Insect Plague, and then we also get Destructive Wave. I really like Destructive Wave here, but overall with Tempest Domain here, it gets a lot of spells that the other subclasses don't get, and that makes Tempest Domain very powerful. So when it comes to ranking Tempest Domain here, I do think I split hairs about it when it comes to Tempest versus Light Domain. I love both of them, but just for right now and this list, I'm going to give it the A tier ranking. And then later down the road, depending on how the list is shaping up, this could be moved up to S tier, but overall an amazing A tier pick here. And next up on the list is a domain that is definitely not A tier, and yes, that is Trickery Domain. So first up with Trickery Domain here, we get the spells Charm Person and Disguise Self. This is okay. We also get the class action Blessing of the Trickster, so this is going to give advantage on stealth checks. And this isn't a spell, and it's a concentration, and it lasts until, well, while you're maintaining concentration. So this can be decent, and you can recast it a bunch of times if you like to play a stealth character, maybe pair this with a rogue. That could be decent, I guess. Moving along to level 2, we get our Channel Divinity Invoke Duplicity. So this creates an illusion, and if the enemy and your allies are within 3 meters of it, your allies and yourself will have advantage on attack rolls. This can be okay. The illusion you create is like immune to every type of damage, so that's unique and cool. We also pick up at level 3 the domain spell of Mirror Image and Pass Without Trace. Pass Without Trace is really good for something like a stealth archer. Now with Trickery Domain here, you might just start to notice a trend where a lot of these spells are very situational and they play towards a style that I really just don't gravitate towards. But anyways, let's move on to level 5. Now at level 5, we pick up the domain spells Fear and Bestow Curse. These are both pretty decent. And at level 6, we get another channel divinity skill, and that is Cloak of Shadow. So this will just basically make us invisible while we're obscured. Why we want to use our channel divinity to make ourselves invisible, I don't know. It's only for like 3 turns, 2 turns. It's not very good. Anywho, and quickly going through the rest of Trickery Domain, at level 7 we get Dimensional Door and Polymorph. Dimensional Door, this is a nice mobility option, but at level 8 we get our Divine Strike for poison damage. This is okay. There's a lot of enemies that are actually resistant to poison, so maybe not that useful. And then at level 9, we get Dominate Person, and then we get Seeming. And Seeming you can use for a bunch of like silly goose times, but for actual like use in combat and stuff, yeah, again, not that great. When it comes to Trickery Domain here, it's a bunch of decent spells paired with a playstyle that I don't gravitate towards. I'm going to put it in C tier, but just know if there's nothing in D tier, it's probably going to be Trickery Domain. Now last and certainly not least is War Domain here. And right off the bat, they are proficient with martial weapons and also can wear heavy armor. We do get the passive feature War Priest, and this grants us War Priest charges that allows us to use our bonus action to have an additional attack. We first start off with 3 of these charges and they come back on long rest. I kind of wish these came back on short rest, but oh well. For our domain spells, we get Divine Favor, and then we also get Shield of Faith, so those are pretty decent. And then at level 2, we get our Channel Divinity and we get Guided Strike. This is going to add a +10 to our attack roll, essentially guaranteeing that we hit our mark. And then at level 3, we get the domain spells Magic Weapon, and then we also pick up Spiritual Weapon, but Spiritual Weapon every cleric gets. Now moving on to level 5, we get another War Priest charge that would bring a total of 4 once you hit level 5. And our domain spells we get are Spirit Guardians, which every cleric gets Spirit Guardians. Fantastic spell, by the way. And then we also get Crusader's Mantle. This is really good as well. Both of them concentrations. Probably Spirit Guardians is always going to be the go-to for a concentration, especially for a more, I would say, offensive cleric. But let's move on to level 6. At level 6, we get the Channel Divinity, War God's Blessing. This is essentially Guided Strike, but now we can give it to one of our allies if they're going to miss. Overall, I'd say this is a very mediocre Channel Divinity, especially when we compare it to the other subclasses. Moving right along to level 7, we pick up Stone Skin and Freedom of Movement. Honestly, these 2 spells probably don't see very much use. Stone Skin here, it's a concentration, so that's kind of the problem with that spell. Freedom of Movement, a little bit better, not a concentration, lasts until long rest, so pretty good there. Level 8, we pick up our 5th War Priest charge, and then we get the Divine Strike weapon. So this is basically just going to add a 1d8 to whatever weapon type we're using. Right now we have a mace, so that's bludgeoning damage. And then at level 9 for our last 2 domain spells, we get Flame Strike and we get Hold Monster. Hold Monster here is excellent in the late game against some bosses. Now, unlike all the other subclasses, War Priest gets an additional benefit at level 11. They get another War Priest charge, so this puts us at 6 total. So where do we rank War Domain? And I gotta say, this one's kind of tough because I think War Domain is kind of unique in the Cleric subclass section here. But just because it's unique, is it actually good though? And I think I'm gonna stick it in B tier. I think it's solid. If I was feeling generous, maybe I'd give it an A-, but I'm just not feeling that right now. I just think it sits in the B tier. Alright, so that is all the Cleric subclasses ranked. This is currently what the tier list looks like, including Paladin. And the overall goal with this tier list is to have sort of a bell-shaped curve, so it will ebb and flow depending on when more subclasses get added to it. I already mentioned earlier that, yeah, Trickery Domain, you're on the cusp of going into D tier. But just remember, even my least favorite subclass in Baldur's Gate 3, you can do a lot with it, and it can be powerful in its own right if you just build it correctly with equipment, or if you do a little bit of multi-classing. But again, this tier list, we're not considering multi-classing. But anyways, that's the video, y'all. If you'd made it this far, I appreciate the hell out of you, and I will see you next time. Peace and take care.